The previous chapter is worshipping Govardhan Hill. Summary. Text one. Worshipping Govardhan Hill. Text 1. Shukdev Goswami said, while staying in that very place with his brother Baladev, Lord Krishna happened to see the cowherd men busily arranging for a sacrifice to Indra. Should I read the purport also? Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami and other acharyas, the words Tatra Eva is in this verse indicate that Lord Krishna stayed in the village of the Brahmanas whose wives had satisfied him by their devotion. Thus, he gave his mercy to those Brahmanas as well as to their chaste wives, who had no one to associate with except their husbands. In that place, the cowherd men, headed by Lord Krishna's father, Nanda Maharaj, were somehow or other preparing an elaborate sacrifice to Lord Indra, and Lord Krishna reacted as follows. Being the omniscient super soul, the Supreme Lord Krishna already understood the situation. Yet, he still humbly inquired from the elders headed by his father Nanda Maharaj. Lord Krishna was eager to enact his pastime of lifting Govardhan Hill and defeating the false pride of Indra, and thus he cleverly inquired from his father about the imminent sacrifice. Lord Krishna said, "My dear father, kindly explain to me what this great endeavor of yours is all about. What is it meant to accomplish? If this is a ritual sacrifice, then for whose satisfaction it is intended, and by what means it is going to be executed? Please tell me about it, O Father. I have a great desire to know and am ready to hear in good faith. Certainly, no secrets are to be kept by saintly personalities who see all others as equal to themselves, who have no conception of mine or another's, and who do not consider who is a friend, who is an enemy, and who is neutral. Purport. Lord Krishna's father might have thought that his son was a mere child and thus could not properly question the validity of a Vedic sacrifice. But the Lord's clever statement here would certainly have convinced Nanda Maharaj that Sri Krishna was making a serious, not a whimsical inquiry, and that a serious answer should thus be given. One who is neutral may be avoided like an enemy, but a friend should be considered like one's own self. Even if Nanda Maharaj did not see friends, enemies, and neutral parties as entirely equal, Lord Krishna, being Nanda Maharaj's son, was certainly a most trustworthy friend and should therefore not be left out of intimate discussions. In other words, Nanda Maharaj might have thought that as a householder he could not act on the highest saintly platform, and thus Lord Krishna furnished additional reasons why his father should trust him and reveal the entire purpose of the sacrifice. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, Nanda Maharaj stood silent, doubting his position of parental affluence, since Garga Muni had predicted that his son would be equal to Narayan in his qualities, and the young boy had already conquered and killed many powerful demons. When people in this world perform activities, sometimes they understand what they are doing and sometimes they don't. Those who know what they are doing achieve success in their work, whereas ignorant people do not. Purport. The Lord here informs his father that people should perform a particular ceremony or activity only after thoroughly understanding it through discussions with friends who should not be blind followers of tradition. We should not be blind followers of tradition. If a person doesn't even know what he is doing, how can he be successful in his work? This essentially is the Lord's argument in his in this verse. Since Sri Krishna as the young child of Nanda would naturally be expected to show enthusiasm for his father's religious activities, it was the father's duty to give the son a thorough explanation of the ceremony. Text 7. Such being the case, this ritualistic endeavor of yours should be clearly explained to me. It is a ceremony based on scriptural injunction, or simply a custom of ordinary society. Text 8. Nanda Maharaj replied, the great Lord Indra is the controller of the rain. The clouds are his personal representatives, and they directly provide rainwater, which gives happiness and sustenance to all creatures. Purport. Without clean rainwater, the, the earth could not possibly provide food or drink for anyone, nor could there be cleanliness. Thus, it would be difficult to overestimate the value of rain. Text 9. Not only we, my dear son, but also many other men worship him. the Lord and Master of the rain-giving clouds. We offer him grains and other paraphernalia of worship produced through his own discharge in the form of rain. Purport. Nanda Maharaj patiently tried to explain the facts of life to his young son, Sri Krishna. But in fact, Nanda and all the residents of Vrindavan would learn an astonishing lesson as explained in this chapter. Text 10. By accepting the remnants of sacrifices performed to Indra, people sustain their lives and accomplish the threefold aims of religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. Thus, Lord Indra is the agent responsible for the fruitive success of industrious people. Purport. One might object that people sustain themselves by farming, industry, and so on. But as previously mentioned, all human and non-human endeavor depends on food and drink, which cannot be produced without ample rain. By the word Trivarga, Nanda further points out that the prosperity achieved through sacrifice for Indra is meant not merely for sense gratification but also for religiosity and economic development. Unless people are well fed, it is difficult for them to execute their duties, and without performance of duty, it is very difficult to be religious. Text 11. This religious principle is based on sound tradition. Anyone who objects it out of lust, enmity, fear, or greed will certainly fail to achieve good fortune. Purport. If a person neglects his religious duties because of lust, envy, fear, or greed, his life will never be brilliant or perfect. Text 12. Sukadev Goswami said, when Lord Krishna heard the statements of his father, Nanda, and other senior residents of Braja, he addressed his father as follows to arouse anger in Lord Indra. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explained that Lord Krishna's intention was not simply to insult a demigod, but rather to knock down the great mountain of false ego that had arisen within, within the Lord's tiny servant, who was supposed to represent the Lord as Indra. By lifting Govardhan hill, Lord Krishna would thus initiate a blissful annual festival called Govardhan Puja, and he would further enjoy the pleasant pastime of dwelling for several days beneath the hill with all his loving devotees. Text 13. Lord Krishna said, it is by the force of karma that a living entity takes birth, and it is by karma alone that he meets his destruction. His happiness, distress, fear, and sense of security all arise as the effect of karma. Purport. Lord's philosophy. There are subtle laws of nature that reward or punish us according to how we react. As you know, so shall you reap. In a future life, one reaps the fruit of his present work. And this is the sum and substance of reality. Lord Krishna, being God himself, could hardly be a serious proponent of this mediocre philosophy. In the role of a young boy, he was simply teasing his pure devotees by preaching it. Srila Jiva Goswami points out that Lord Krishna was thinking, why are these eternal associates of mine appearing as my father and other relatives and friends, so caught up, so caught up in this worship of Indra? Thus, although the Lord's main purpose was to take away the false pride of Indra, he also wanted to remind his eternal devotees that they need not divert their attention to other so-called gods. Since, in fact, his devotees were already living with the supreme absolute truth, the Almighty Lord Himself. Text 14. Even if there is some supreme controller who awards all others the results of their activities, he must also depend upon a performer engaging in activity. After all, there is no question of being the bestower of fruitive results unless fruitive activities have actually been performed. Purport. Here, Lord Krishna argues that if there is a supreme controller, he must depend on a performer of activity to reciprocate with, and must therefore also be subject to the laws of karma, being obliged to award happiness and distress to conditioned souls according to the laws of good and evil. This superficial argument neglects the obvious point that the laws of nature that prescribe the the good and bad results of pious and impious acts are themselves creations of the all good Supreme Lord. Being the creator and sustainer of these laws, the Lord is not subject to them. Furthermore, the Lord is not dependent on the work of the conditioned souls, since He is satisfied and complete within Himself. Out of His all-merciful nature, He awards the results appropriate to our activities. That which we call destiny, fate or karma, in an elaborate and subtle system of rewards and punishment meant for gradually encouraging conditioned souls to evolve to the state of perfect consciousness, which is their original constitutional nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has so dexterously formulated and applied the laws of material nature governing punishment and reward for human behavior that the living being is discouraged from sin and encouraged toward goodness without suffering any significant interference with his free will as an eternal soul. In contrast to the material nature, the Lord exhibits his essential nature in the spiritual world, where he reciprocates the eternal love of his pure devotees. Such loving affairs are based completely on the mutual freedom of the Lord and his devotees, not on a mechanical reciprocity of coinciding selfish interests. The Supreme Lord, assisted by his pure devotees, repeatedly offers the conditioned souls of the world the opportunity to give up their bizarre attempt and at exploiting the material universe and go back home, back to Godhead, for an eternal fee of bliss and knowledge. Considering all these points, the atheistic arguments given here by Lord Krishna in a playful mood are not to be taken seriously. Text 15. Living beings in the world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous work. Since Lord Indra cannot in any way change the destiny of human beings, which is born of their own nature, why should people worship him? Purport. Lord Krishna's argument here is not a negation of free will. If one accepts the existence of karma as a system of laws according reactions for our present activities, then we ourselves, according to our nature, will decide our future. Our happiness and distress in this life have already been adjudicated and fixed according to our previous activities, and not even the demigods can change that. They must award us the prosperity or poverty, sickness or health, happiness or distress due us by our previous work. However, we still remain the freedom to select a pious or impious mode of activity in this life, and the choice we make will determine our future suffering and enjoyment. For example, if I was pious in my last life, in this life the demigods may award me great material wealth, but I am free to spend my riches for good or for bad purposes, and my choice will determine my future life. Thus, although no one can change the karmic results due him in this life, everyone still remains his free will, by which he determines what his future situation will be. Lord Krishna's argument here is quite interesting. However, it neglects the overriding consideration that we are all eternal servants of God and must satisfy Him. Text 16. Every individual is under the control of his own conditioned nature, and thus he must follow that nature. This entire universe, with all its demigods, demons, and human beings, is based on the conditioned nature of the living entities. Purport. Lord Krishna here elaborates upon the argument given in the previous verse. Since everything depends on svabhava or one's conditioned nature, why bother worshipping God or the demigods? This argument would be sublime if svabhava or conditioned nature were all powerful, but unfortunately it is not. There is a supreme controller and we must worship him, as Lord Krishna will emphatically reveal in this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. For now, however, he is content to tease his relatives. Text 17. Because it is karma that causes the conditioned soul, conditioned living entity, to accept and then give up different high and low grade material bodies, this karma is his enemy, friend, and neutral witness, his spiritual master and controlling Lord. Purport. Even the demigods are bound and limited by the laws of karma. That Indra himself is subordinate to the laws of karma is explicitly stated in the Brahma Samhita. The Supreme Lord is Govinda awards all creatures the appropriate results of their work. This is as true for mighty Indra, the Lord of the material heavens, as it is for the gem, as it is for the germ called Indra Gopa. The Bhagavad Gita also states, only those who have lost their intelligence because of various material desires surrender unto demigods rather than worship the Supreme Lord. In fact, the demigods cannot award benefits to anyone independently, as stated by Lord Krishna in the Gita. All benefits are simultaneously issued by the Lord Himself. Thus, it is not altogether incorrect to say that demigod worship is useless, since even the demigods are under the laws of karma. In fact, this is the case. But Lord Krishna, the Supreme Absolute Truth, is not subordinate to the law of karma. Rather, he can independently offer or withhold his favor. This is confirmed in the verse from the Brahma Samhita quoted above, the third line of which is, the Supreme Lord burns up all the accumulated karma of those engaged in his loving service. Not only is Lord Krishna above the laws of material action and reaction, but he can immediately dissolve these laws for anyone who satisfies him through loving service. Thus, the Almighty God is supreme in absolute freedom, and by surrendering to Him, we can escape the bonds of karma and stop accepting their dismal rule as supreme. Text 18. Therefore, one should seriously worship work itself. A person should remain in the position corresponding to his nature and should perform his own duty. Indeed, that by which we may live nicely is really our worshipable deity. Purport. Lord Krishna here proposes the modern, if absurd, philosophy that our work or occupation is really God, and that we should therefore simply worship our work. Upon close scrutiny, we observe that our work is nothing more than the interaction of the material body with material nature, as Lord Sri Krishna states in a more serious mood in Bhagavad Gita. Karma Mimamsa philosophy accepts that good activity in this life will give us a better next life. If this is true, there must be some type of conscious soul different from the body And if that is the case, why should a transcendental soul worship the interaction of the temporary body with material nature? If the words here mean that one should worship the laws of karma governing our activities, then one may astutely ask what it means to worship laws, and indeed what might be the origin of such laws, and who is maintaining them. To say that laws have created or are maintaining the world is a meaningless proposition, since there is nothing about the nature of law that indicates it could generate the existential situation it is supposed to govern. In fact, worship is meant for Krishna himself, and this real conclusion will be clearly revealed in this chapter. Text 19. If one thing is actually sustaining our life, but we take shelter of something else, how can we achieve any real benefit? We would be like an unfaithful woman who can never achieve any actual benefit by consorting with her paramour. Purport. The word shaman means actual prosperity, not merely the accumulation of money. Here, Lord Krishna boldly argues that just as a woman can never achieve actual dignity or enlightenment from an illicit lover, the residents of Vrindavan will never be happy by neglecting the real source of their prosperity and worshipping Indra instead. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the audacity that child Krishna displayed before his father and other elders should be understood as an exhibition of transcendental anger aroused when he saw his eternal devotees worshipping an insignificant demigod. Text 20. The Brahmana maintains his life by studying and teaching the Vedas. The member of the royal order by protecting the art, the Vaishya by trade, and the Sudra by serving the higher twice-born classes. Purport. After glorifying karma or work, Lord Krishna now explains what he means by prescribed duties born of one's nature. He was not referring to any whimsical activity, but rather to the religious duties prescribed in the Varnashram or Vedic social system. Text 21. The occupational duties of the Vaishyas are conceived in four divisions: farming, commerce, cow protection, and money lending. Out of these, we as a community are always engaged in cow protection. Text 22. The causes of creation, maintenance, and destruction are the three modes of nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. In particular, the mode of passion creates this universe, and through sexual combination causes it to become full of variety. Purport. Anticipating the possible objection that a livelihood based on cows certainly depends on Lord Indra, who supplies rain. Lord Krishna here introduces a mechanistic theory of existence known as atheistic Sankhya, the tendency to attribute exclusive causality to the apparently mechanistic functions of nature is an old tendency indeed. 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna referred to a doctrine already well known in human society. Impelled, this is text 23, impelled by the material mode of passion, the clouds pour down their rain everywhere, and by this rain all creatures gain their sustenance. What has the great Indra to do? What has the great Indra to do with this arrangement? Purport. Lord Krishna continues his mechanistic explanation of existence, concluding, who needs who needs the great Indra, since the rain sent by the clouds, which in turn are impelled by the mode of passion, is actually producing everyone's food? The word Swarvataha indicates that the cloud magnanimously send their rain even on the ocean, rocks and barren land, where there is no apparent necessity for such sweet water. Text 24. My dear father, our home is not in the cities or towns or villages. Being forest dwellers, we always live in the forest and on the hills. Purport. Lord Krishna here points out that the residents of Vrindavan should recognize their relationship with Govardhan Hill and with the forests of Vrindavan, and not worry about a distant demigod like Indra. Having concluded his argument, Lord Krishna makes a radical proposal in the following verse. Text 25. Therefore, may a sacrifice for the pleasure of the cows, the Brahmana and Govardhan hill begin, with all the paraphernalia collected for worshipping Indra. Let this sacrifice be performed instead. Purport. Lord Krishna is famous as Go Brahmana Hita, the well-wishing friend of the cows and the Brahmanas. Lord Krishna specifically included the local Brahmanas in his proposal because he is always devoted to those who are devoted to the godly Vedic culture. Text 26. Let many different kinds of food be cooked, from sweet rice to vegetable soups. Many kinds of fancy cakes, both baked and fried, should be prepared, and all the available milk products should be taken for this sacrifice. Purport. The word super indicates bean, broth, and also liquid vegetables. Thus, to celebrate the Govardhan Puja, Lord Krishna called for hot preparations such as soup, cold preparations like sweet rice, and all types of milk products. Text 27. The Brahmanas who are learned in the Vedic mantras must properly invoke the sacrificial fires. Then you should feed the priests with nicely prepared food and reward them with cows and other gifts. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Lord Sri Krishna in, in, instructed his father and other residents of Vrindavan in the technical details of this Vedic sacrifice to assure the quality of the sacrifice and also to inspire Nanda and the others with faith in the concept of such a sacrifice. Thus, the Lord mentioned that there must be orthodox brahmanas, regular sacrificial fires, and proper distribution of charity, and things were to be done in the order given by the Lord. Text 28. After giving the appropriate food to everyone else, including such fallen souls as dogs and dog eaters, you should give grass to the cows and then present your respectful offerings to Govardhan Hill. Text 29. After everyone has eaten to his satisfaction, you should all dress and decorate yourselves handsomely, smear your bodies with sandalwood paste, and then circumambulate the cows, the brahmanas, the sacrificial fires, and Govardhan Hill. Purport. Lord Krishna wanted all the human beings and even the animals to eat nice Bhagavat Prasadam, sanctified foods offered to the Lord. To enthuse his relatives with a festive mood, he requested them to dress beautifully with fine clothes and ornaments and to refresh their bodies with luxurious sandalwood paste. The essential activity, however, was the circumambulation of the holy Brahmanas, cows, sacrificial fires, and especially Govardhan Hill. Text 30. This is my idea, O Father, and you may carry it out if it appeals to you. Such a sacrifice will be very dear to the cows, the Brahmanas, and Govardhan Hill, and also to me. Purport. Whatever is pleasing to the Brahmanas, the cows, and the Supreme Lord Himself is auspicious and beneficial for the entire world. Spiritually blind modern people do not understand this and instead adopt a scientific approach to life that is rapidly destroying the entire earth. Text 31. Sukadev Goswami said, Lord Krishna, who is himself powerful time, desired to destroy the false pride of Lord Indra. When Nanda and the other senior men of Vrindavan heard Sri Krishna's statement, they accepted his words as proper. Text 32 and 33. The cowherd community then did all the all that Madhusudan had suggested. They arranged for the Brahmanas to recite the auspicious Vedic mantras and using the paraphernalia that had been intended for Indra's sacrifice. They presented offerings to Govardhan Hill and the Brahmanas with reverential respect. They also gave grass to the cows, they then placing the cows, bulls, and calves in front of them, they circumambulated Govardhan. Purport. The residents of Vrindavan were simply devoted to Lord Krishna. That was the sum and substance of their existence. Being the Lord's eternal associates, they were ultimately not concerned with Lord Indra or ritualistic sacrifice, and they were certainly not interested in the mechanistic philosophy that Krishna had just spoken to them. They simply loved Krishna, and out of intense affection, they did exactly what he had requested. Their simple, loving mentality was not small mindedness or ignorance, since they were devoted to the Supreme Absolute Truth, who contains within himself all existence. Thus, the residents of Vrindavan constantly experienced the highest essential truth, underlying all other truths, and that is Sri Krishna himself, the cause of all causes, and that which sustains the existence of all that exists. The residents of Vrindavan were overwhelmed in loving service to that supreme absolute truth. Therefore, they were the most fortunate, most intelligent, and most pragmatic of all living beings. Text 34. As the blissfully ornamented cowherd ladies followed along, riding on wagons drawn by oxen, they sang the glories of Lord Krishna, and their songs mingled with the Brahmanas' chanting of benedictions. Text 35. Krishna then assumed an unprecedented, huge form of instilled faith in the cowherd men, declaring, I am Govardhan mountain. He ate the abandoned offerings. Purport. In chapter 24 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada writes, quote, when everything was complete, Krishna assumed a great transcendental form and declared to the inhabitants of Vrindavan that he was himself Govardhan Hill in order to convince the devotees that Govardhan Hill and Krishna are identical. Then Krishna began to eat all the food offered there. The identity of Krishna and Govardhan Hill is still honored, and great devotees take rocks from Govardhan Hill and worship them exactly as they worship the deity of Krishna in the temples. Devotees therefore collect, collect small rocks or pebbles from Govardhan Hill and worship them at home because this worship is as good as deity worship. Unquote. Lord Krishna had induced the residents of Vrindavan to assume a significant risk on his behalf. He convinced them to neglect a sacrifice to what is, after all, the powerful government of the universe and to worship a hill called Govardhan instead. The cowherd community did all this simply. The cowherd community did all this simply out of love for Krishna. And now, to convince them that their decision was correct, Lord Krishna appeared in an unprecedented, huge transcendental form and demonstrated that he himself was Govardhan Hill. Text 36. Together with the people of Braja, the Lord bowed down to this form of Govardhan hill, thus, in effect, offering obeisances to himself. Then he said, just see how this hill has appeared in person and bestowed mercy upon us. Purport. In a clear form, this verse that Lord Krishna had expanded himself and was appearing in his normal form among the festival goers of Vrindavan, while simultaneously manifesting himself as the great form of Govardhan hill. Thus, in his form of a child, Krishna led the residents of Vrindavan in bowing down to his new incarnation as Govardhan hill. And to all, he pointed out the great mercy bestowed by this divine form of Govardhan. Lord Krishna's amazing transcendental activities were certainly in keeping with the festive atmosphere. Text 37. This Govardhan hill, assuming any form he wishes, will kill any residents of the forest who neglects him. Therefore, let us pay our obeisances to him for the safety of ourselves and our cows. Purport. Kamarupi indicates that the form of Govardhan can manifest as poisonous snakes, wild animals, falling rocks, and so on, all of which are competent to kill a human being. Purport. According to Sridhar Swami, the Lord presented six, six theoretical points in this chapter. 1. That karma alone is sufficient to determine one's destiny. Number 2. That one's conditioned nature is the supreme controller. 3. That the modes of nature are the supreme controller. 4. That the Supreme Lord is simply a dependent aspect of karma. 5th. That he is under the control of karma. And 6th. And 6th. That one's occupation is the actual worshipable deity. The Lord presented these arguments not because he believed them, but rather because he wanted to stop the impending sacrifice to Indra and divert it to himself in the form of Govardhan hill. In this way, the Lord desired to agitate that falsely proud demigods. Text 38. The members of the cowherd community, having thus been inspired by Lord Vasudeva to properly execute the sacrifice to Govardhan hill, the cows and the brahmanas returned with Lord Krishna to their village, Braja. Although the Govardhan Puja purport. Although the Govardhan Puja was performed in a blissful and successful way, the matter was hardly finished. Lord Indra is, after all, tremendously powerful, and he received the news of the Govardhan sacrifice with burning anger. What ensued will be described in the following chapter. This chapter ends, and the next chapter is Lord Krishna lifts Govardhan hill. Text 1. Sukadev Goswami said, my dear King Parikshit, when Indra understood that his sacrifice had been put aside, he became furious with Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men who were accepting Krishna as their Lord. Purport. At the very beginning of this chapter, Sukadeva Goswami reveals the foolishness of Indra and the absurdity of his anger. Indra was frustrated because the residents of Vrindavan accepted Sri Krishna as their Lord. But the simple fact is that Sri Krishna is the Lord not only of the residents of Vrindavan but of all that exists, including Indra himself. Thus, Indra's petulant reaction was ridiculous. As the common saying goes, pride goes before fall. Text 2. Angry Indra sent forth the clouds of universal destruction, known as Samvartaka. Imagining himself the supreme controller, he spoke as follows. Purport. The word Isha Mani here is very significant. Indra arrogantly considered himself to be the Lord, and thus he exhibited the typical attitude of a conditioned soul. Many thinkers in the 20th century have noted the exaggerated sense of individual prestige characteristic of our culture. Indeed, writers have been coined the phrase the me generation, quote unquote. Everyone in this world is more or less guilty of the syndrome called Isha Mana, or proudly considering him oneself the Lord. Text 3. Indra said, just see how these cowherd men living in the forest have become so greatly intoxicated by their prosperity. They have surrendered to an ordinary human being, Krishna, and thus they have offended the gopis. Purport. Of course, Indra was really saying that the cowherd men had offended him, Indra, by taking shelter of Krishna, whom Indra considered to be a mortal. This was certainly a gross miscalculation on Indra's part. Text 4. Their taking shelter of Krishna is just like the foolish attempt of men who abandon transcendental knowledge of the self and indeed try to cross over the great ocean of material existence in the false boats of fruitive ritual sacrifices. Text 5. These cowherd men have acted inimically toward me by taking shelter of this ordinary human being, Krishna, who thinks himself very wise but who is simply a foolish, arrogant, over-talkative child. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, through the insult of Indra, goddess Saraswati is actually praising Krishna. The Acharya explains, free from pretension, just like a child. Stabdham means that he bows down to no one because there is no one for him to offer homage to. Agyanam means that there is nothing more for him to know because he is omniscient. Pandita Maninam means that he is highly honored by the knowers of the absolute truth, and Krishnam means he is the supreme absolute truth, whose transcendental form is full of eternity and ecstasy. Martyam means that although he is the absolute truth, he nevertheless appears in this world as a human being out of affection for his devotees. Indra wanted to rebuke Krishna as Vachalam because of Lord had presented many audacious arguments in the line of Karma Mimamsa and Sankhya philosophy. Even though he did not accept these arguments, thus Indra called the Lord Balisha, foolish. Indra called him Stabdha because he had spoken boldly even in the presence of his own father. Thus, although Indra attempted to criticize Sri Krishna, the Lord's transcendental character is in fact impeccable, and this chapter will demonstrate how Indra came to recognize the position of the Lord. Text 6. To the clouds of destruction, King Indra said, the prosperity of these people has made them mad with pride, and their arrogance is backed up by Krishna. Now go and remove their pride and bring their animals to destruction. Purport. It is clear from this verse that the residents of Vrindavan had become highly prosperous simply by protecting cows. Since Indra wanted to destroy their so-called pride based on wealth by killing their animals, well-tended cows produce large quantities of milk from which come cheese, butter, yogurt, ghee, and so on. These foods are delicious by themselves and also enhance other foods such as fruits, vegetables, and grains. Bread and vegetables are delicious with butter, and fruit is especially appetizing when mixed with cream and yogurt. Dairy products are always desirable in civilized society, and the surplus can be traded for many valuable commodities. Thus, simply by a Vedic dairy enterprise, the residents of Vrindavan were wealthy, healthy, and happy, even in the material sense, and most of all, they were eternal associates of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Text 7. I will follow you to Braj, riding on my elephant Airavat, and taking with me the swift and powerful wind gods to decimate the cowherd village of Nanda Maharaj. Purport. The Samvartaka clouds were frightened by Indra's powerful mood and thus carried out his order, as described in the following verse. Text 8. Sukadev Goswami said, on Indra's order, the clouds of universal destruction released untimely from their bonds, went to the cowherd pastures of Nanda Maharaj. There they began to torment the inhabitants by powerfully pouring down torrents of rain upon them. Purport. The Samvartaka clouds could cover the entire earth with a single vast ocean. With great strength, these clouds began flooding the simple land of Braja. Text 9. Propelled by the fearsome wind gods, the clouds blazed with lightning bolts and roared with thunder as they hurled down hailstones. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that the word Marud Ganai indicates the seven great winds, such as Avaha, who presides over the region of Bhuvarloka, and Pravaha, who holds the planets in their places. Text 10. As the clouds released torrents of rain as thick as massive columns, the earth was submerged in the flood, and high ground could no longer be distinguished from low. Text 11. The cows and other demigods, shivering from the excessive rains, वो कर दो क्या करना होगा।
लाइव नहीं होगा तो पूजा कैसे होगा? पानी दे दो पानी।